BMW was about to make a decision that would change everything. After watching Mercedes dominate racing in Germany, the spiteful BMW engineers were ready to risk it all. Facing bankruptcy and very little experience being successful in racing, were ready to build a race car that would win. There was no other choices. They needed to be seen at the top of the podium. Even though the accountants argued against it, they would take the risk. Little did they know that this risk would pay off, and it would change BMW forever, and they would change the world forever, proving to other manufacturers that the public wanted production cars. Because of this risk, the world would get production cars from Toyota, Honda, Mercedes, and so many other brands that we never would have before. The BMW E30 series is one of the most popular BMWs ever. It has accounted for 30% of car sales of BMW. For the first 3 series was often overlooked. It was the start of one of the most successful cars to come out of Germany, the E21. It came out in the summer of 1975 and would last 7 years until it would be replaced in 1982 with the E30. Even though I said it was overlooked, the E21 was well liked at the time. It was fuel efficient and fun. Car and Driver at the time said the numbers it was able to do were very impressive, and the suspension was one of the best at high speeds. There were 9 variations that you could get, with the 323i by far being the fastest and most powerful. The car was known for being very reliable, and while there are still many of the 1.3 million E21s still driving today. The second generation of the 3 Series was the E30, the first generation to offer the 4-door and a diesel version. But this is not the reason that the E30 had changed BMW forever. It is one of the most iconic German cars ever made. Because to understand that, we have to look at what was happening in German racing at the time. The Deutschen Production Wagen Meisterschaften, or the German Production Car Championship, started in 1984. This would later become the Deutschen Tourenwagen Meisterschaft, or DTM as it's more commonly called. This was a racing series that was homegrown in Germany. All of the major manufacturers in Germany wanted to win. This was because the racing series had quickly grown lots of popularity in Germany and other places in Europe. If you won this series, it would be great publicity and people would be more inclined to buy your brand's car. At this time, Mercedes had a strong grip on DTM. They had their 190e that was not just one of the highest selling cars in Germany, but also making its name for itself in racing. Mercedes loved this fact. This was Mercedes' first entry back into racing after they took a break from racing and closed the racing programs. So when the engineers from Stuttgart had a break to build the 190e into a race car, they had the help of AMG and the Cosworth for the engine. It is a legendary car that I one day make a video on. And they finished making this car just in time for the first season of DTM. Because they were the only team that had a car that was able to do well in DTM, they easily won the first 4 seasons of DTM. At the race, the championships were held at the Nürburgring. There was no other cars besides the Mercedes 190e. At the end of the race, the person in first place was Ayrton Senna. Yes, that Ayrton Senna. But that just shows the dominance of Mercedes that they had on DTM at the time. And BMW hated this fact. The fact that the Mercedes, one of their rivals, was doing so well in DTM made BMW annoyed, and they wanted to take the crown of DTM back from Mercedes and bring it to Bavaria. But, like any good racing series, there was rules that they had to follow, and they couldn't just go out and build a race car. You see, DTM followed the same rules as Group A racing, even though all the rules were arguably important. The most important one was the homologation rules. Homologation is very simple. It's how many of the identical car to the race car you need to sell for it to be entered into the race. Most homologation numbers are 250, maybe 25, so brands could create one-off race cars and not have to worry about selling the cars. But Group A, and then therefore DTM, the number of cars you would have to make was 5,000. This made sure that the race car that was being raced was a modified version of the production car. A large homologation rule made BMW's sales department not want to release the car that they were even going to spend money developing on, fearing that they would lose even more money than making the car on them selling them. But when Ford won the next DTM, that was the final straw. They couldn't see their racing series that was supposed to be all German won by an American team. They didn't sit well with this prideful German engineers, and BMW's CEO, Kloin, decided to put the green light on the production. You see, Eberhard von Koin, the CEO of BMW at the time, was the reason that we even know of the brand today. Eberhard took BMW when they were a mess in the 70s, completely unfocused, making motorbikes and some slightly passable cars. But Eberhard wanted more from BMW. He wanted them to be a brand that meant quality, luxury, and above all, a brand that made fast cars that would win. So in hopes to make this, he told the motorsports division to do one thing: win, and win DTM. And the engineers were ready to do that. But this would require a ton of work. Because of the homologation rules and how strictly they were enforced, to win DTM, they would need a production car that they could modify to be fast. And the best BMW could offer at the time was the 3 Series. And like I mentioned earlier, it barely had 100 horsepower. And it was way too narrow to run fat tires. So instead of making a race car out of the 323i, they decided to make a brand new race car and then sell it to the public. This was a defining moment in BMW, one that would change their entire history forever. Long were the days of making slow, everyday grocery getters, and now was their time to win. Show Mercedes and Ford and all the other German manufacturers that they were here to win and that they were ready to. With very clear instructions, the engineers at BMW took apart the 323i. They took off the panels, the engine, everything, all the way down to just the chassis. They would build this new car from the ground up. The first thing they needed to decide on was the engine. The 3 Series engine at the time was slow from the 60s, so it was completely off the table. The S38, a 6-cylinder engine that was made by BMW, was the most powerful engine, but it was way too heavy and much too big for the front of the BMW. Another option was the legendary engine from the M1, the M88-1. But the engine they went with was built on the M10 block. Even though it was a 4-cylinder engine, it was not lacking. The powertrain started off life in Formula 1, being part of one of the most powerful engines in the world. But BMW was not done there. They took the head from the M88-1 engine and cut off 2 cylinders and slapped it on the M10. The result was a Frankenstein of BMW engines that was reliable and could withstand a beating. The rest of the car was built in the same vein, with the same amount of time and dedication, prioritizing reliability and weight savings. And when it came to the outside of the car, very little was shared with the original 3 Series, just 4 panels. The rest of the car was streamlined and made much more aerodynamic. They added wider fenders to cover thicker tires and wheels. Everything on the M3 was built just for the M3. And when the M3 finally met the tarmac of a racetrack in 1987, no one expected anything of it. Almost every car on track was more powerful, and no one expected anything special to come from the M3. But they would be wrong. The M3 could be driven harder and more reliably, and it didn't matter who was behind it. It would be able to have the confidence to brake later, turn closer to the apex, and accelerate out as fast as possible. When that came with a responding success that no one expected out of the underpowered BMW. Because of its remarkable engineering, it was lighter and more controllable and reliable. This would end up making the BMW always at the top of the pack. It dominated DTM, and also every single touring car championship. The M3 would win the touring car championship, the European touring car championship, the Eurasian touring car championship, the Australian touring car championship, and even a one-off world touring car championship. And that's not all. At the height of its reign, the world would see that the BMW M3 would win a race around the world once every single day. There should be no surprise that the M3 is widely regarded as one of the most successful road cars in history, if not the most successful road car in history. But even with the winning on the track, the accounts at BMW were still not getting enough sleep at night. They had invested 5,000 cars, and they didn't think they would get any of those back. They sent a few out to dealerships in hopes that they would bring customers in to buy a different BMW model. And they were kind of doing what they were supposed to. They were bringing customers into dealerships, but instead of getting a different car, they wanted to buy the M3. After seeing the M3 race and win every single top brand car around the world, they wanted one too. To the surprise of absolutely no one except BMW, the original 5,000 cars sold out immediately, forcing BMW to make 15,000 more. And this great success, both on the racetrack and the showroom, would change BMW forever. Now they could create sports cars that the public would want, and there would be a demand. Everybody wanted to see a sports car win on the track, and then everyone wanted that car in the driveway. Every single M3 after that, from the E36 to the G80, would have never been created if Eberhard von Kuhn hadn't had the desire to win. But the M3 didn't just prove to BMW that people wanted fast cars. When Nissan made their GTR, they knew it would sell. The same goes for the Evo, the Type R, and the SDI. This decision by an uninspired brand out of Munich, in spite of Mercedes, would go on to change the whole world and how everyone thought about cars.